Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and it will all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This evening I have the honor, if you all are wondering why I'm dressed like this, I'm attempting to be a Fredericksburg pioneer to present this proclamation. Tony Klein will be coming up in a little bit to present the city a flag for the 175th anniversary that will be flown above the City Hall for the remainder for the year. And we also have a proclamation from the Governor of Texas, Clay Abbott. Proclamation, whereas Fredericksburg was the second German town in Fredericksburg, founded by the Alversaren, better known as the Society of the Protection of German Immigrants in Texas on May 8, 1846, and whereas Baron Opfried Hans von Moisebach, expecting more German settlers to New Braunfels in the winter of 1845 and 1846, found a site 80 miles northwest where resources were abundant. Lands were cleared and its town lots were distributed, each settler receiving a town lot and 10 acres in the vicinity of the settlement. And whereas Moisebach, realizing that friendly relationships with Native Americans was needed, assembled a team of 40 men and met with the Pennataktok Comanches on March 1 and 2nd, 1847, to make a treaty with them, and to this day the treaty is still considered to be unbroken. And whereas, while the founding fathers of Fredericksburg faced obstacles and created a beautiful, unique German colony in the heart of the hill country, and whereas, among the many traditions the German settlers brought with them to Texas, the love of the lasting history and traditions is the strongest, and whereas, it is most appropriate that we recognize the history and traditions of the city and all the activities that have been planned to celebrate the occasion of this anniversary. Therefore, I, Charlie Keeney, Mayor of Fredericksburg, Texas, by virtue of the authority vested in me, do hereby proclaim the year of May 8th, 2021 through May 9th, 2022 as the 175th anniversary of Fredericksburg, Texas, in the city of Fredericksburg, and urge all citizens to join with me in celebrating the city of Fredericksburg's 175th anniversary. In witness hereof, I have hereto set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Fredericksburg to be affixed on this 3rd day of May 2021. Tony?
There you go, Tony.
Hope it's right. This flag is to be flown for the entire year. Ken, you're in charge to make sure it goes up.
Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Employee recognition scan.
Okay, Mayor and council members, this is a part of the council meeting where we recognize any employees who we received accolades on over the last several weeks. And seems like lately we've gotten a lot of positive comments about our police department, which I think are very timely in light of some of the things going on around the country. But over my tenure here over the last 9 years or so, I think I've gotten more positive comments about our police department, our officers, and any other community I've been working for. So tonight, I've got two other comments that have been offered by local citizens over the last week or so that I wanted to share with the council and the community. First off, this was an email I got this past Saturday, May 1st. And don't have the person's name, but I've got their email address. And this says, I just wanted to send an attaboy to Officer Ben Bosey, number 185. This individual said, I had an encounter with him yesterday when I committed a traffic infraction. Officer Bosey introduced himself professionally and explained what he needed and why I was contacted. Very rarely do I encounter an officer with such a professional, courteous demeanor. Hopefully, the Fredericksburg Police Department can retain officers with a similar high level of service and standards in this community. Thank you. So I wanted to share that with the council. And the other comment I received from Vicki Manley, again, is an email. It says, last night, our granddaughter was filling up her car at the gas station on Highway 16 and Tybydale Road. Her young dog somehow jumped out of her car window, was struck by a truck, and died. When we arrived, there were 3 police officers with her. They were kind, caring, and very concerned about our granddaughter's state of mind. I wish we had gotten their names so we could thank them again. It's so assuring knowing that our community has these men looking out for our families. Please, if you know who they are, tell them thank you, and we hold them in our prayers. God bless all of our police officers. Vicki Manley. And this was, the 3 officers was Sergeant Trey Schnelly, Officer Smith, and Officer Wayman. Those were the 3 officers involved in that incident. So again, gives me pleasure to share some of these comments with the council and with the community.
Thank you. It's always nice to hear our police force is well-trained and well-represented in our community. Okay, we'll go to public comments. Under the Texas Open Meetings Act, each person making a public comment has the right to publicly voice concerns or criticism of the city council, including criticisms of any act, omission, policy, procedure, program, or service. However, that right does not extend to public criticism that is otherwise prohibited by law. To ensure that all members of the public can be heard in a fair, impartial, and respectful manner, any public comment that includes defamation, intimidation, personal force, profanity, or threats of violence is prohibited. We have a number of folks who have signed up for public comment under 5. Eric will be timing. We'll have a clock on the screen. He will give you a 1-minute warning. And when you come to the speaker with you, if you'll just let us know if you're a city resident or not. Our first speaker that is signed up is Kimberly Lambs, and the next one would be George Studer.
Hello.
Hi.
I am here asking again for the city to please stop advertising the vaccine and remove the COVID information from the city homepage. This is not a public health emergency in Fredericksburg. It has been over a year. Please, let's at least come to some type of a compromise and take it off the city homepage. I might not have a degree in epidemiology, but I do have a degree in art and design, and I'm fully aware of exactly what an advertisement is. It doesn't have to stand for or against something in order for it to be an advertisement. And that sign is a small piece of a much bigger picture here that's going on a psychological level to tell people to go and get this vaccine, which is really a shot. That decision should be between a person and their medical doctor and their family. That should not be something that is constantly being bombarded in people's minds everywhere they look, everywhere they go. The grocery store, the TV, the radio, social media. Does the city really need to continue to play a role in that? Or can that be the hospital's job? Further, this advertisement is a misleading advertisement as well, because this shot does not meet the CDC definition of a vaccine, and it says vaccine. The definition of brainwashing is the application of a concentrated means of persuasion, such as an advertising campaign or repeated suggestion in order to develop a specific belief or motivation. Just please, I'm just asking you guys to just back away from that topic from now on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, George Studer, Again, if y'all would just let us know if you live in the city or not, that's what would be appropriate. Nice to know. Thank you.
Something up first.
Surely.
Again, George, this is a revised version. I took your comments seriously.
Can you write me eye? Okay. Ready? Yeah, so I want to say three things. First of all, I want to recognize Polly Rickert, who has been your thinker and your analyzer. She has seen through a lot of confusing discussions, and she's made recommendations, clear recommendations that you all voted on and actually, resolved the issue and went forward. And she's a cheerful team player. And I hope you all appreciate that who she is and what she's done for your council. And I think you'll miss her. Secondly, I want to tell you that Shelley has worked like crazy since before last elections. And she's revised the process that was good last fall into something superb this time. Everything went off like clockwork. Mary and I were there for 5 days working for her before the election, all during election day, and everything worked fantastic. Third, I want you to consider that we haven't had a invocation before the Pledge of Allegiance since I don't know when, but I'd like you to consider that as an agenda item on upcoming city council workshop, and then hopefully maybe a vote afterwards to do it. I have been working with pastors and on a proposal in front of you, and we'll be, between now and next time, I'll have a ministerial alliance cooperation and recommendation on this. It'll be more refined, but I'd be glad to have your input before that, and then we've got some more to talk about. You'll have some to talk about at the workshop, and I'm getting it to the city attorney also. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thank you, George.
Okay, Dennis Fusenberger, and then after that would be Tom Marshall.
My name is Dennis Kusenberger. I am not a city resident, live in the county, but I own numerous properties in the city. And one of those properties is the reason that I'm here tonight. I'd like to share my recent experience with the Historic Review Board and how I feel they are infringing on property rights by forcing their opinions about how things should be on a property owned and located in the historic district. A lot of people refer to this as the historical district. I appeared before the board in April with a request to replace my single-pane windows in my office with more energy-efficient insulated windows. Every new construction in town is required to have insulated windows. Not only would this conserve energy, but also reduce the noise coming from trucks, sirens, and motorcycles. There are times when the Harleys are idling at the light, and when they take off, if you're on the phone, you literally have to stop the conversation until they're gone. Miss Hudson had pretty much nailed the coffin shut with her presentation by the time I was allowed to speak. I even had my window replacement representative at the meeting who they didn't even ask to show their proposed quality Pella windows. And just so you know, yes, these were vinyl windows, and that's where their heartburn came in. The fact that they will be located behind existing wooden screens will make it impossible for anyone to tell they have been changed or to give them a stroke over the change. It would make a huge difference in the atmosphere of our office, and it is something I don't think this group of individuals should have any right to dictate to a property owner. There is such a thing as private property rights, and as long as I am not damaging the well-being or rights of another person, it shouldn't be any of their business. While making my pitch as to why I wanted to do this replacement, one member of the board mentioned that he was against the replacement because taking the old windows out and installing the new ones would hurt the structural integrity of my office. A person with that kind of thinking is sitting in a position of power to dictate what a property owner does with their property is absurd. So the chairman calls for a vote to deny my application. Silence falls over the room as nobody would make the motion for what must have been at least 30 seconds, and until the chairman stared them down with a look, letting them know that somebody better do this. Finally, a motion was made, second, and passed by all except Richard Laughlin opposing. I'm puzzled by recent projects in towns such as the old Peach Tree, which had windows accidentally removed during the demolition process. They got new modern windows. They're not hidden by screens. I understand one of the Avery houses over here on Schubert Street also had a construction accident and had to ask forgiveness. And then just recently, the Austin Street right up here behind the Palace Theater, when that was redone, had new windows replaced with by the old casement windows. And on the Herster building on West Main, of all things, they put in metal windows. And I'm still waiting for someone to explain to me how much more unsightly my new windows would be, covered by screens, than the concrete parking garage that is going up right behind this building on East Austin Street. Talk about non-historical and in plain sight. They didn't like my idea to replace the windows. The board is really not going to like my next move, which basically they told me I can do anything I want to on the inside of my windows. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay, Tom Marshall, and then after that, Timothy Ellis Riley.
I'm Tom Marshall. I am a resident, been a resident of Fredericksburg for 30 years. Over the past couple of weeks, I've been pretty busy talking to a lot of people. And one thing has surfaced that I had hoped to work on. And of course, I realize I don't have to sit where you're sitting to work on it. And I'd like to try to convince you to help the community on this project. What we're talking about, and I believe it has been brought up before, is community gardens. It's not anything new. There's lots of communities that are doing it. And I think for a town like Fredericksburg to do something like this will definitely enhance the community feeling that we have here in Fredericksburg. Having lived in Germany for 8 years, it's very common practice in Germany. And, I think we should consider that. I believe the Parks Department could rule over it, whatever. I don't see a whole lot of really input or, involvement from the city, but it's, some support from the city is would help this get off the ground. Maybe hopefully get this on the agenda sometime in the future, and let's talk about this and benefit a lot of citizens out here in the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, Timothy Ellis Riley, and then after that would be Jeanette Hermuth.
Howdy. Hope to hang out with you soon, Mr. Luckenbach. Okay, been a little while. At the last meeting, Mr. Myers, after everyone commented, had brief comments or responses, and I wasn't familiar. I think that was new, and I've been in a lot of meetings, but maybe it's just when it's occasional. I imagine it might have happened before. But my suggestion is, because I think I would have remembered it. I don't miss too many of these. But if Mr. Myers or anybody else at the end of public comments, because y'all can't comment, but Mr. President over here can, then I would hope that myself or anybody else would have the opportunity to maybe correct any misunderstanding, or because it is hard to communicate sometimes, and I might be misunderstood. So the 2 points that Mr. Myers referenced was, I referenced the length of the length of the packet was 220 pages because it has an annual report in it. Those things happen many times throughout the year. And my comment was that I think that packet could even be bigger, and I think that our agendas can include more. It just happened to be a big day with a lot of pages. It seemed like Mr. Myers thought that that I was commenting on something different. Hopefully, I'm just trying to make myself clear. And then with the STRs, I wasn't concerned that it was slowed down. I mean, yes, I was at the meeting, and I do know the process, and I do know that you're finding a group, and you're trying to step back and ask for community involvement. But again, as I've tried to commit my time and energy to this effort, I guess my comment was in reference to, I don't, at this point, trust you to find the right people. During the pandemic, you put together a task force that gave, maybe decent book reports once or twice. They begged for something to do, and were given nothing to do, really, as far as I could understand it. And then Mr. Myers sent me the 5 pages printed out here of accomplishments over the last year or so. And again, my point is it could be much more. We can be much more efficient. We can bring more people here. It's been a few weeks since I've said we should include Zoom and allow people in whatever interface. It doesn't have to be Zoom, we just say that, but we should be able to include people into these meetings again through video, and continue to show through our city leadership that we're actually including more people. Because again, I've been through I missed one meeting in the last however many, year and a half, and I watched the room swell and why it swells and then why it dwindles away, and why we're back to the same number of voters in our last election, just over 2,000. There's no actual improvement in those areas, and I've sat down with almost every one of you personally, and you would agree, and you want that. You want more youth, or you want more contributions. So thanks for letting me go over a little bit. I appreciate that.
I knew you were getting to the end.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, Jeanette?
Good evening, I'm Jeanette. I live here in town. A couple things on my mind tonight. One is I want to add to Kimberly's. Think there is, first of all, I don't know what happened with the emergency declaration. You guys were going to look at metrics, and basically everything just dropped. As far as I know, I talked to Justin Calhoun, the emergency coordinator, and he was explaining to me that basically the city, there's not much more that you're doing. The resources are not being utilized right now. He just gave the last 200 shots to the hospital, and they're taking care of everything. So, and the testing's dying down, people aren't showing up, and there's not another testing scheduled. That was the only reason they're saying you're keeping the emergency emergency declaration is you get resources. The second is money. Right now, you're not getting any money. You just got the CARES money. You're just waiting for the possibility of getting money sometime down the road. And I talked to him, he said, well, they've all decided, or we've kind of decided that even though things are down low right now, because there's really no cases, there's nothing going on, this is not a pandemic. He said that, who knows, there could be a spike down the road. Well, in the emergency, like George Studart had done a presentation a while back, in that emergency legislation, or whatever it's called, that describes what emergency declaration being under an emergency, one of the goals, number one thing, is to get back to normal as quickly as possible. If you've had a hurricane, you have a hurricane that's emergency, you mobilize, you get back to normal as quickly as possible, then it's over. Right now, this is like we had a hurricane like a year ago, we'll say, COVID. We didn't know what it was, but very quickly we found out it is not all that everybody thought. The numbers never got anywhere close to what they were predicting. And now we're sitting here waiting for another hurricane. This needs to end. This is not an emergency. This is really unethical, immoral, to be basically misrepresenting, saying there's emergency when there's not, in order to get funds that you don't know that you're going to get, but you just want to be in line. for sometime in the future. So again, it also sets up that whole thing with the vaccine, which is not a vaccine. Again, it does not do what a vaccine does. All right, so we've got a lot of issues here that there's a lot of suits happening, and I hate for you guys to end up being on the end of that. But a lot of states are being sued, cities are being sued, counties are being sued.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda.
Mayor, can I just, can I?
Sure, please do. Yeah, please do.
In response to Timothy, the city attorney has recently advised the city that city staff can respond to any item for clarification purposes. So that was why I commented at the last meeting. And so I did want to clarify one of the comments that you made this evening, and that is you indicated that you hope that we find the right people to be involved in the review of our short-term rental ordinance, Timothy. And I just wanted to make sure you are aware that the right people are going to be the entire community. We are going to have a public input session on May the 25th. We sent out a press release last week. Hopefully it'll be in the paper this week. May 25th from 11 to 2, we're going to have at the Pioneer Pavilion, we're going to have what's called a public listening session. We're, again, inviting everybody, the neighbors, the STR owners, anybody that wants to come out to tell us what they like and don't like about the way we handle STRs is invited to come to this meeting. So we're not selecting anybody to be involved in this process. We're selecting everybody. So I wanted to clarify that so you'd be aware of that. Because again, you probably aren't aware of that because that hadn't been in the paper yet. So we're not picking a committee or task force or anything like that. Okay. So.
Great. Well, I hope that actually people show up for that.
Based upon the calls we've gotten, I think there'll be a big crowd there. So there's a lot of interest. It's probably the #1 topic right now. So.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Okay, item number 6, the following items may be acted upon in a single motion. No separate discussion or action on any of these items will be held unless pulled at the request of a member of the city council. A, consider approval of the city council meetings, April 19, 2021, regular meeting. B, consider, discuss, and take action regarding approval of the 4th of July parade and patriotic program and request to add the 4th of July parade to the city's general liability insurance. Does any council member wish to pull one of those? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
We have a motion by Tom and a second by Bobby. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There is none. Motion carries. Moving on to number 7, resolution. Consider the approval of resolution 2021-05R related to the annual review of the city's investment policy and investment strategy policies. Laura?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The Public Funds Investment Act requires that the city's investment policy be reviewed and approved by the City Council on an annual basis. It is recommended that the City Council review and approve the resolution and investment policy.
Any questions? No.
Mayor, I have a question on, Laura, on page, agenda packet, page 35, on the list of qualified institutions. Security State Bank, Arrowhead Bank, Blanco National Bank, Broadway Bank, Guarantee Bank, that's Chase Bank. It has then American Bank and Trust and HCSB. Hasn't American Bank and Trust changed to First United?
Yes, some of the banks have changed. We're not currently doing any investments with them. We do intend to revise the policy during this next year, which we will change all that. We still want to leave all of the local entities on there.
My question was, since American Bank is no longer in town, should that be changed to First United Bank?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then HCSB?
Happy State Bank.
Okay, is that, that is?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's Hill Country State Bank is now, it was Centennial, now it's Happy. So is HCSB Happy?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right. That's all I have.
Okay,
Thank
Bobby?
you.
No question.
Jerry?
No.
Okay, no further discussion. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve.
A motion by Bobby,
No, second.
second by Tom. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There is none. Motion carries. Moving on to section 8A, consider the approval of the annexation agreement for services requested by the property owner of the property located at 3255 South State Highway 16, across from the airport, Z2104. Jason?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Council. The annexation agreement you have tonight is for that 17-acre tract. It's roughly just across the street from the end of the airport runway. This is in the ETJ. The owner is looking at annexing that into the city in order to do a RV park development. So this annexation agreement you have before you is very straightforward and simple. We didn't get into a lot of negotiations. The only provision in here that's different than some of the other ones is that the applicant would be required to extend those utilities at their cost. I believe where water is roughly about 500 feet away, sewer is about 1,000, but that may change depending on the path that they need to take to get there. This property would be zoned accordingly through the P&Z and through the council process. So this is slated to go to P&Z on Wednesday for a recommendation on the zoning category, and then it'll be back to council on the 17th of this month, and then if necessary, we'd have a June meeting for that second reading. So I can answer any questions you may have, and I know the applicant is here as well.
Mayor, I have a question on the land use. Okay. It's a category that I've never heard of.
Yes, employment center.
Yeah, what's an employment center?
Ultimately, the employment center, I believe the goal of that is more for a business park, manufacturing area. If you read through that land use category, that's the only district that we have in the area or in the city employment center. It calls out for the most consistent zoning to be M1 or M2, so that's light and medium manufacturing. I think given the time frame of the adoption of the comp plan 2006, manufacturing was still a big push to bring those areas into the city and to the United States as a whole. Generally, airports used to be a place that you would kind of zone those things. They kind of fit right in. Some of that planning has switched a little bit to where they need to go. So staff is going to ultimately recommend amending that land use category to commercial. We're not sure that manufacturing is the ideal location there in that area.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bobby?
No questions.
Jerry?
That's all contingent to city property already?
Yes, sir. It's immediately adjacent. So the city limits is actually on that side of South Highway 16. So they would be able to attach on that way.
Okay.
Holly?
No questions.
Okay. I don't have any either.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the request for the annexation agreement.
We have a motion by Jerry.
Second.
Second by Polly. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, we're going to move to item 8B. I'm going to say what it is, and then we have two people who have signed up to speak. Consider, discuss, and take appropriate action on the following temporary structures, tents in the historic overlay district. Before I let Jason come up to visit, we have two folks who like to visit. You'll have 3 minutes, Robin, Kusar, and Ed. So I know you're out there. Please come up. And you'll get the 1 minute warning.
Y'all tell me if I'm too close, because you want to hear this. This is good stuff. I'm Robin Kauser, and we do not live in the city, but we own Crockett House, which is an event center in the city, and it's actually directly across the street from City Hall. And those of you who grew up here might know it as the Falstaff House, or even further back as the Waymiller House. So I'll start off and then I'll let Ed give you all the meat and potatoes. Just a little bit of the background. We own this lot that is lot 97. It was granted by the Society for the Protection of German Immigrants in Texas in 1847. So this is pretty neat that we're having the proclamation tonight and we're talking about the importance of the history of Fredericksburg. 11 years after the fall of the Alamo. We sent this package out to you all electronically. I'm not referring to any one particular page. in what I'm saying, but you have it both electronically and now in front of you. Only 4 families have had the privilege of owning this property. Franz Kruger, the Kirchner-Waymiller family, the Hugo Bassi family, and the Kauser family. So we've been working on the restoration of these 2 buildings since 2017. We've worked very closely with the Historic Review Board. They've been incredibly helpful to us all along the way. We're trying to maintain the integrity of the buildings, the grounds, and the historic district, but our hope is that we can share the history of these properties with visitors to Fredericksburg through the ability for them to host their historic events at Crockett House. In June of 2019, the city started the process to expand the historic district overlay, and that's when we became aware of the temporary event tent ordinance. Hoffman House was eventually removed from that overlay because it would have cost them dearly in their business. And it's worth noting that that was the reason that was taken out of the historic overlay. The other thing I'd like to say is that our property looks right out at market plots, and you all will note in one of the pictures the aerial view of the tents that cover market plots during any one of the many festivals that we have here. Oktoberfest has now spilled over into the Adams Street, and so tents now go up on Adams Street too. I'm not saying we shouldn't have these events. All of these things are important to Fredericksburg. I'm just asking that we be allowed as well to have an event tent in the back of our property so that people can experience not just coming and looking at a building or going through a museum, but they can be in the building. They can entertain their friends in the building. They can have walk away with the feel of Fredericksburg and memories of Fredericksburg that they've made that will stick with them. So thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Sorry I talked too.
No, that's all right. You did fine. I could tell you we're almost done.
I was so close to being done.
Thank y'all, Mr. Mayor, City Manager, Council, staff, and citizens. I'm Ed Kauser. We don't live in the city, but we own property here. We've been in Fredericksburg 24 years. Person who'd been here 5 generations told me the other day he had to be here 25 before he could be considered a resident. So we're working on it. The truth is we have a big commitment to Fredericksburg. We love it here. I don't know if you picked up on the fact Robin is a historian. That's what her degree is in. She specialized in Western history at A&M. And she has a business here of her own. She's a dyslexia therapist and chairperson of the Dyslexia Therapist Board. So proud of her and the work we've done for the city here. On my handout, I'm just going to really focus on slide 4. If you don't mind, take a look at that. Just across the top, one of the points that Robin made is huge. And if you look at it from a zoning perspective, you'll see this thing has evolved quite a bit. It's a little difficult to figure out sometimes what the zoning means in Fredericksburg. But when you get down to basically event centers in Fredericksburg, the bulk of this data in the middle is all from the CVB listed event venues. There's 61 in the county. Of those, about a third are in town, which means every time there's an event in the country, in the county, a lot of those are surrounded by cabins. We don't bring those folks to town typically. They come, they stay, they have food, they have their event, they leave. One of the nice things about this event venue business as it grows in the city of Fredericksburg is it brings the kind of people we want here to stimulate the economy. They buy food, they stay in hospitality, hotels, and bed and breakfasts. Have 1 minute, Mayor. And they also buy gifts. So these kinds of event venues are valuable to the city and the economy. You'll notice most of the event venues that are listed on the CVB, that is not their primary business. They are either a church, an insurance company, in some cases they're a government or a museum. I'm not saying they shouldn't put on events. We are solely an event venue. Eventually we'll evolve to more of a restaurant as well. But the event venue is allowing us to showcase this restoration. It is such a cool property. I invite you guys to come over and take a walk through. It also will allow us to prove that capitalism reigns. You can't afford to renew one of these kinds of properties and fund that through events and the economy that should sustain that. The event business is new here, so we invite you to consider the fact that its growth is good for Fredericksburg. It's very different than the reason this legislation and 8.1 and M4 in the city code were created in the first place, to prevent trinket sales and t-shirts and stuff like that. But we really appreciate your consideration of recasting this ordinance, and take a look at the packet and let us know if you have questions.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, thank you for those two presentations. Would be you, Jason. There you are.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So I've done a little bit of research in this. I think there's two separate issues at play. I think one is the original ordinance from 2015. That's the ordinance that actually discussed and initiated the temporary use and the ban on tents. My understanding from that is that was, as Mr. Kauser said, to kind of tackle the issue where we had some vacant lots along Main Street and people were kind of showing up, popping up some tents. It was more of a yard sale, flea market type issue. There are some concerns, I think, from other business owners about how does that affect them when they have to go through the brick and mortar process. Is that an unfair advantage? Are they collecting sales tax? So there's several factors there. And then I think the follow-up was in the expansion of the historic district. I think that played a part in this, but I think they are two separate distinct issues. So I'd be glad to discuss any concerns you have with the ordinance. Ultimately, the way it reads is this is a temporary use. I don't think the ordinance was really designed for permanent uses. The event center we have is new. I believe it's our first one in town. And so it's a little bit different than what we see on a temporary use. Some of these people that come in and go, well, we're going to be here for the weekend and we want to do this, and they go to a certain area and they can do their pop-up tents. They're just prohibited in the historic district. There are some very specific exceptions written in this ordinance. Most of all those are for nonprofits, community events, things that generally have a benefit to the entire community, and so that's usually what you see. There's just some exemptions in there for religious ceremonies or religious assembly. Some of those are a little bit more, a little bit difficult to kind of say where does the assembly part end and the business part start. Some of the questions we were asking as we went through this is, well, if a wedding takes place at a church and they move a ceremony to this facility, is that still a religious assembly? If they get married at the church, then or at the structure of the facility, then yes, that's an assembly. So staff's really just kind of looking for some guidance on do we think the ordinance was working the way it was intended? I can tell you in my short time here, I've seen the reduction in those tents in the historic district. So I think if that's the goal, then yes, those are being met. However, there are some exceptions there for restaurants, and so the next question is an event center similar enough to a restaurant? And that's probably a question that I can't answer at this time, but I'm looking for some direction direction, if y'all want me to look into that, that'd be something we'd be glad to do. We've had some internal discussions on how that will affect. I can tell you in the 3 months I've been here, several DRC meetings. One of the first questions we get into when we talk about additions to anything within the Main Street District, 9 out of 10 of those, the first question they ask is, can they do an addition via a tent? So it's been a hard no on some of those from us. And so they move forward with brick and mortar extensions of those structures. So that would be a concern staff would have is if we do allow this at a greater rate, what does that do to additions to our historic district? Does that push them more towards the temporary side versus the structural side? But I think there's a possibility maybe finding some middle ground in there. So really it's kind of the preference of council and just give me a little bit of feedback so I know which way to go with our research. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, just to add one other point, I thought Jason was going to make this. We get comments about the structures like Western Edge is constructing at their restaurant and like we have over the playground at Market Plots. Those are fixed construction projects. Those are not temporary structures. So the businesses still have the ability, if they want to add a fixed structured tent, they still have the ability under ordinance to do that, right?
Yes, sir. We recently did one for the old West End Pizza site. They redid their little outdoor seating area, tore down that cover. They've come back with some of those structural shade, very similar to what we have over the playground here. But those did have to go through ARB or HRB for the Historic Review Board. They looked at whether that fits in with the surroundings, what those colors are. So we do have a process to allow structures that may not necessarily be brick and mortar, but they're more permanent in nature outside of kind of the wedding tents that you see go up maybe a Thursday and they come down on Sunday. Again, duration of those tents would be something that we would look at if y'all are interested, but there are avenues to kind of permanent those structures.
Tom?
I think that this needs to be something that the Historic Review Board looks into before it comes to us.
Bobby?
My question, has the Historic Review Board looked at this?
We have not looked at this specific issue as of lately. Like I said, our last meeting, we did look at some tents that were being put in. Those were permanent structures, but we have not brought forward any kind of item for their consideration. We did put something on their next agenda item, so we will be discussing it at the next meeting. The Cousers would be more than welcome to attend. We can have those conversations. We could get at least a little feedback and find out which way they feel, if it's a negative, a detriment, if it's something that could be done if done properly. So we can have those conversations later this month.
And then, has there been any discussion about what the definition of temporary? I mean, is it?
No, we haven't gotten into any of those. Those are pretty serious discussions when you're talking definitions. Temporary versus permanent. Some of our codes, you really have to look at how they're defined. So the building code may define temporary differently or permanent differently than we do in the zoning code. So if we do have those discussions, we need to make sure all those definitions are married up and are on the same line.
Jerry?
Well, I guess, my question would be is, looking at the property, I know where the property is at, and the tent would be kind of more towards the back of the property back in there. Can that be seen from the street on Crockett Street and that? And can it be seen from the street? If it can't be seen, I mean, and then again, you kind of look at how big a tent you're looking at. Are you looking at covering the whole back piece of the property with it, or is it just going to be, I don't know, 30 by 40 or 40 by 50, something like that? Or is this just kind of a temporary thing that you're looking to do until you might put up a permanent structure back there? Y'all spend a lot of money. I mean, it looks really nice. Y'all done a hell of a lot of work on the place, and it really looks nice. I would love to come over and walk through it and take a look at it. So.
Please do. Come to the microphone,
Yeah, come
please.
to the mic.
Thank you. As far as your question about whether the Historic Review Board has looked at this, what I have put in that packet, I went back and I reviewed all the minutes of the meetings of Planning and Zoning and City Council in 2019. And I made notes out of those minutes so that you could see how much discussion the council has wrestled with this issue. And I feel like they were supportive in that it was that, well, as a matter of fact, Brian Jordan is quoted in there as saying that there was an unintended consequence with this, with the expansion of the historic district, and that there was recommendation that they look at this. But the reason that nothing happened is because council decided to pull Hoffman House out. And they were going to look at changing up the ordinance to make it fit so that this could all be included. But because it was taken out of the historic overlay, nothing happened. So that's all documented there for you. And the only other thing I'd like to say about having a permanent structure, again, it's the ambiance of the history of the place. And if you have a chance to come and sit out there when you're in the back, magically the noise from Main Street disappears and you can see the stars and you can hear the church bells and you can just enjoy being in the middle of Fredericksburg. But people who are having their events need to have some kind of assurance that if the weekend that we just had happens, that the money that they have spent on all of their wedding, planning, guests, everything, or gala, or anniversary party, or whatever else it is, won't be rained out, won't be ruined, or sleeted out, or whatever else. They need to have that option of having the tent.
Thank you, Robin.
In terms of the size, 30 by 40, 40 by 50, exactly. That's what people are talking about. But generally, what Jason suggested, you put it up, you take it down. Some people don't want them. They're willing to take the risk because they know here in Fredericksburg we have 300 blue sky days a year, and they like that. Others are like, we're going to go do business with the big barn type venues in the country and put tents up out there on their 100 acres if you guys won't let us. So that's really what we're competing with. When we get them to town, they're going to stimulate the economy and people will feel welcome and they'll come back.
Thank you.
So thanks for your consideration.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the original 2015 ordinance, we were concerned about those retail pop-ups that were competing against brick and mortar retail. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's my understanding.
And so we didn't really have a significant amount of event venue presence in town, I don't believe, at 2015.
Not from my understanding as well.
Okay. And I do recall being on planning and zoning when the overlay went through and the whole issue about Hoffman House. So I was there for those discussions, and that was an issue, and it was more expeditious to just remove them from the overlay and they're blocked from the overlay rather than wait for the HRB to go back through and adjust the tent ordinance. So I would be in favor of reviewing and adjusting the tent ordinance because that was the intent when we discussed Hoffman House, and we just went for what was quick, and that was just exclude Hoffman House. Okay. So I think y'all do need to take a revisit because things have changed and we've got event places and we need to consider that.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, I'd like to respond to that because I was on council. Ollie was on planning and zoning, but this did come before council. Hoffman House was not removed from the historic overlay. They were not included in the expansion. So the issue there, one of my concerns right now is that this ordinance applies to the historic district, to the historic overlay district. So what's what's allowed in one part of the district will be allowed in other parts of the district. So I think one thing that needs to happen is if we're going to be, if we're looking at this, we need to think about the unintended consequences. We're not just talking about the Cowsers' ability to put a tent up behind their place of business on Crockett Street. We are talking about STR owners and or anybody in the historic district being able to use to erect a temporary structure on their property. So another question that I would have is when did the Cowsers buy the property?
I believe 2017, is that correct?
Okay.
2019.
Okay, so you purchased in 2017, and the ordinance was passed in 2015, correct? That's, Jason, so what you said was the original ordinance?
Yes, sir. 2015 was the original temporary tents ban.
Okay.
I don't believe the ordinance, I mean, you could certainly apply the ordinance to all of the structures in the historic district, but I think, Daniel, and correct me if I'm wrong, one option would be to exempt event centers from this requirement. Could that be added to the ordinance? It's just one possibility.
Yes, and so there's several ways we can do it. We can define a tent. We can say these types of tents aren't allowed, these are. That gets a little difficult, especially as tents and technology and business models change. One is to do it by land use. Can we say a restaurant, they're allowed tables and the little tents out front, so is an event center similar to a restaurant? So we could pick some businesses. At that point, then we have to decide, well, does that apply to anybody that serves food, anybody with an event, tasting rooms, places that serve charcuterie boards, but they're a bar and they want to have a special event. So those are all things that we would have to consider. But yes, it would be probably easier to pick land uses that could do that. But no ordinance is going to be without its pitfalls. So that'd be something we'd want to look at.
So restaurants right now have the ability to have umbrellas on their tables,
yes,
but
sir.
not tents.
Yes, sir.
And there is a difference between an umbrella and a tent.
The way it is defined, yes.
Okay.
Now, there are some special exemptions, but they have to go through HRB to get those approved as far as form, color, and look. So they can't be advertising. They can't say Corona Club or Miller Lite or anything like that. So,
But the point is, you could exempt, I mean, you could say, well, it would certainly apply to residential, STRs, and those kind of uses, and just define the areas that were land uses that would be allowable for tents. You could add that as a revision to the ordinance if the council wants to.
I have a question. So currently, if you own a house on Creek Street that's an STR bed and breakfast, they're not allowed to put up a tent?
there's an exemption for residential in the ordinance.
That's R1.
Yes, sir. So in an STR R2, I don't think those are allowed for special events. Now, if it's a private matter, then someone that is having a birthday party and they put one up, then that can be done. So
R1 allows it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, concern that I have, and I agree wholeheartedly with Polly, ordinances need to be looked at. The state does it all the time. They call it sunsetting. If it's not applicable, they get rid of it. If it's applicable, they keep it or modify it. I think it's time for us to revisit that, and I would say that being you guys and Historical Review Board have to hold hand in hands on this. We do have, the chains on Main. We have, variances that we can grant there as well. You have to be a citizen of Fredericksburg. You can't have, there are options for people to mark yes, 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 yes. And there were several of those now that are, James Avery, Security State Bank. They were allowed in the chains on Main because they were able to answer certain questions in a fashion that they were allowed. So whatever the council's direction is, I think Polly's already said that. I think that would be something that, I don't know, we need to make a motion or vote on it to do that or just give direction. Daniel?
There's no requirement for action. You can just give direction.
Okay. I see a consensus that you guys get together with the Historical Review Board and come up with a a solution, and I do know when you come up with a solution, you always create a ripple that causes maybe minor or more salute, but I think we should give it a shot.
Well, I think we can definitely try, and we'll try to keep the ripples to a minimum, so.
That's what I wanted to hear, but yeah, good luck.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other comments on that? If not, we'll move on. We're going to go to the city manager's report. However, we do have one person who has signed. We're going to move item D, the election update. We're going to move that up. But we do have Tom Marshall who would like to speak to that. Yep, you're still here. Good. And I believe I covered everybody that has signed up. So did I miss anyone? Good.
My name's Tom Marshall. I'm still a resident of the city. If I could just add a quick comment, addition to my last comment. I understand the comprehensive plan is coming under review again in the upcoming months, whatnot. That may be a time to look at the community gardens things to include that in the comprehensive plan. Okay, about the election. Over the past year, we've done a lot of testing for illnesses. In the past couple of weeks, we had a test. 8,000 people in this community were eligible and participated in that test or didn't participate. As it turns out, 15% of that 8,000 were not positive for the disease. 85% were positive for voter apathy. That may be similar to other cities and maybe nothing to worry about because it's been so common for so long. But if you look at the history of the vote and what it can lead to, it is much more serious than anything that we've experienced the past year. This is our vote. It's our city. The state's not going to say anything about it. San Antonio, Austin's not going to say anything about what we're doing with our vote. It's ours. We own it. We're either going to do something to try to fix it, or we're going to suffer the consequences at some point in the future. I know there's a reading about a local community that had 100% participation in the vote a number of years back. Or both people voted for mayor.
1 minute.
It does happen. Okay. Yeah, we're not going to get 100%, but 15% is just, we are sick. And let's try to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With that being said, we're going to get an election update. Shelley? There you are.
Okay. The city of Fredericksburg has 7,908 registered voters, and as of Saturday, 1,236 cast their votes, which is a 15.6 turnout. The city secretary's office received 233 applications ballot by mail, and we had, as of April the 30th, 161 that were returned. We had early voting. There were 636 people who cast their ballots. 439 people cast their ballots on election day. So there will be we'll have 3 members of early voting ballot board meet on this Thursday, May the 6th at 2 p.m. to count the eligible ballots that have been received within the time frame that the election code allows, that after May the 1st. So we've had 3 provisional ballots that need to be counted or reviewed. We have 9 ballot by mails that came in on election day. We had 5 ballot by mails that were postmarked before May the 1st and we received today. And then there is 1 ballot that was actually put in, a ballot by mail that went to Gillespie County. That was the city's ballot, and we got one of theirs, so we've switched those.
After the early voting ballot board will meet, the final paperwork will be all completed. The city staff is recommending canvassing the May 1st, 2021 city election on Monday, May the 10th at 5:30 in the city council conference room. At that time, the two top candidates will be sworn in and taken an oath, but due to a provision in the city charter, the oath cannot be effective until May the 15th. At the regular meeting on May the 17th, a ceremonial oath will be administered by the municipal judge, and then the meeting will begin. Is there anything else?
Comments, Tom?
So when do we have to, are we going to meet in a special meeting to accept the vote? Don't we have to do that?
Yes, you'll have to canvass. It's called a canvass.
Right, the
meeting.
canvas. So when, so what?
May 10th will be at 5:30.
May 10th, 5:30.
Yes, the meeting on May 10th is the meeting to canvass the election. And we need a majority of the council there.
Okay.
At City Hall?
At City Hall.
Did you repeat that, Daniel? It did come through this one eardrum.
On May the 10th, which I think is that next Monday?
That is next Monday.
That, at 5:30 PM is the planned time for the canvassing of the election.
Okay.
It's sort of the formal acceptance and reporting of the final numbers for the election.
At City Hall.
Right, City Hall conference room.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Daniel.
That will be noticed like any other public meeting.
Okay.
And again, we need at least three council members there.
Right. So I also wanted to let you know that unofficial tabulation results are posted at City Hall as well as on this, the city website. And if I did not include the overages and unders, which you really don't include, but I have those in case you want them.
Gary? Molly? I think George hit it on the nail. Thank you, George.
I want to thank Shelley for all your work that you did with all of this and your whole crew that you had there. Y'all are totally professional on everything, and thank y'all for all your work.
No matter how much work we do, the work is really done by the people working the polls. And, to ensure the integrity, you have to find the right workers, and I think we have a really good group, that and counting.
Thank you.
Please, Shelley, make sure that your list of workers, you commit them for the next election. Okay. In blood, if possible.
Thank you. All right, we'll continue with city manager's report, electric rate benchmark report.
Mayor and Council, I wanted to remind you, last week I sent you a benchmarking report that compares our electric rates with 20 other communities. And we do a lot of rate comparison, our water and wastewater and sanitation rates, but it's been a number of years since we've compared our electric rates. And we will post that report on the city's website this week, and that will be available for people, for the public to review. But we did compare very favorably with the other 20 cities included in that benchmarking report. We were the 8th lowest of the 21, and so again, we wanted to share that with the public. And again, it goes along with our water and wastewater and sanitation rates being very comparable to other communities. We're usually on the low side of all of our utility rates. So I wanted to mention this because it's been a number of years since we've done our electric rate comparison. So again, we'll post that for the public. We'll put out a press release and let everybody know to review that report. Next item, any questions on that? Okay, next item, we have had two meetings over the last couple of months, bringing back our Community Visioning Steering Committee to look at what we've accomplished over the last couple of years and what has changed over the last couple of years, primarily due to kind of the new normal, what's happened with COVID, and whether or not we need to go back and relook our visioning recommendations and possibly change some of them. And also, we want to look at assigning responsibilities for some of the recommendations that have not been completed yet. I think the council was concerned, you've expressed your concerns, that the city can't be responsible for everything in that report, so we need to start parceling out the remaining recommendations. And so what has happened last couple of months, first off, I wanted to remind you the members of the steering committee, the co-chairs were John Weisinger and Rosemarie Mazanki, and other members of the committee were Kathy Scherer, Linda Lagerhans, and Lee Foege. And joining us, we've invited Polly to join us because she was very involved in the community visioning process, serving on a committee, and of course she's been a member of the city council and been involved in housing. And we also invited Jim McCullough to join us. Jim has been very involved in the education, the high school programs, the community college programs, and so we wanted his input on training and education. And then the last meeting, we invited Clinton and Jason to join us because of their knowledge of some of the infrastructure recommendations and other recommendations included in the report. So what we've done over the last two meetings is, first off, as Timothy mentioned, we've prepared a list of accomplishments, basically 5 pages of what we've accomplished that fit into the recommendations that were included in that visioning report. And I think Polly may want to speak to this, but the committee at our last meeting remarked, we've done a heck of a lot of positive things over the last two and a half years that reflect back on the visioning. So we were kind of surprised once we got that whole list compiled on all that's happened in a positive way. And so we've prepared that. It's in the final draft form. Once we get that finalized in the next week, we'll post that on the city's website. We'll release that to the community. So we've got a listing of the accomplishments. The other thing that we've been involved in is preparing what's called a SWOT analysis. And again, that's looking at where we are today, the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats in our community. And so we've, again, spent a lot of time over the last month or so dealing with that. Polly and the other members of the steering committee all added their input. We also asked for input from the chamber, EDC, and CVB, and they provided some information for the SWOT analysis. And once again, that's in the final draft. And once we get that, we want to get council input and again some input from the community before that's finalized. So then the next step will be again looking at the recommendations that we haven't accomplished and start looking at parceling out some responsibilities. And that will probably be most of our next meeting will be devoted to that topic. So again, we're back revisiting that. We wanted to make sure, and I think this council at that time wanted to make sure that the visioning report wasn't something that sat on the shelf somewhere. There was a lot of time that was spent on that, a lot of public input, a lot of meetings, a lot of committee involvement, and we wanted to make sure it was a living document that we could work together and accomplish. And again, we've accomplished quite a bit. So we wanted to share that with the council this evening, that update.
Thank you.
Charlie, I have a question for Kent. Is Gillespie County involved in this in any way?
Not yet, but they will be. We definitely, and especially when we start assigning responsibilities, Councilman, and they will be involved. And in fact, that's a good point. We probably need to send them a draft of the 2 documents that I've just mentioned and make sure we get their input before they're...
Right, because there's been a lot about, this is... Polly was part of the visioning. I was a committee chair with the visioning. This was a community visioning process, not just the city of Fredericksburg, but our entire community, hospital, the taxing districts, FISD. So I think that we need to look at our accomplishments across the board from the various entities that are part of our community, and remember that it's not just the city of Fredericksburg that's implementing the visioning document, which is a community document. Thank you.
So Polly, did you want to add?
Yeah, that was one thing, trying to collect the accomplishments across the community, because the number of elements of that visioning report that are actually the responsibility of our city government are very limited. The bulk of those actions are community-based actions, nonprofits, other entities, individuals, things like that. I was pleasantly surprised that we had 5 pages of accomplishments, to be honest, especially since we had COVID hit us and not a lot happened last year. So that was really helpful. The purpose of the SWOT is to help us actually reevaluate and determine whether there are any action items that need to be accelerated or more emphasis. The one thing we don't have coming out of the visioning is actually a strategy for implementation and a timing for implementation. And I think at this point, we've plucked a lot of the low-hanging fruit that's available, and we need to be a little more rigorous on how we implement going forward to make sure that we're implementing the right elements of the visioning and not chasing our tail on people distributing their energy across too many things and nothing actually gets really done. We just get little incremental bites of everything, and that's not necessarily a good thing for the community. So we thought we would, as the committee and the invitees, initiate the process to do this reevaluation and then work with the other members of the community to figure out what do we need to put in terms of resource against some of these items so that they actually move forward in a meaningful way.
Okay. And just remind you, two specific accomplishments that came out of the visioning process. Number one, our original STR ordinance. We had a lot of push for that in the community visioning process. And then more recently, the Grace Center. That was a specific recommendation that came out for domestic violence. And so that board's been organized, their fundraising starting, and they've got a site selected, and hopefully you'll see some construction going on in the Grace Center very soon. So those were two specific recommendations that came out of that process.
Okay, good ones too. Okay, any other comments? If not, we'll move on to the next one, City Council Workshop.
Okay, we do have a date now. I've conferred with all the council. The next work session will be on Wednesday, May the 19th. And we'll be at the Cardinal Room. Chris Meade will be hosting us and showing off some of the improvements in the golf facility there. And so that will be at 8:30 till about noon. And again, we'll limit that to the 4 topics we previously discussed. And look forward to everybody's input on May 19th at the Cardinal Room, 8:30.
Could you remind me what those topics were?
Okay, we want to revisit the, well, first off, we have budget amendments. We have a lot of budget amendments to discuss with the council as a result of a lot of the changes that have taken place this year with the storm and COVID. And so we want to run through those. And then we wanted to start talking about the council's budget priorities for next year. What do you want to try to include in next year's budget? And we like to get that input up front so that when we prepare a budget, it meets your priorities. Then we wanted to revisit, normally after every election, the council likes to revisit your rules of procedure. This is basically the format for your meetings and how you pass ordinances and so forth, so the council rules of procedure. And then we really need to get council's direction on the middle school reuse. We have committees that are meeting, including a council member and a city staff member. And before we got too far out on stating the city's position, we wanted to make sure we understood the council's position on, are you interested in looking at the reuse of the middle school if the bond election passes? If so, what buildings? And so we just wanted to kind of have a general discussion and make sure we're not getting off track on where the council wants to go as far as the middle school campus and possible reuse. So those are the topics.
If it'd be permissible, I'd like to just throw in, I know George Studer has come twice to us by invocation, and I'd like a very short report from our legal counsel on invocations at our meetings. Is that something we can do at a
That would be
workshop?
part of the rules of procedure, I think.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
That's where to be. Okay, good deal. That's great. Great news. Thanks. Thanks for reminding me. Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, legislative update.
Okay, 4 bills we've been tracking the last week or so. Wanted to share with the council. First off, I know one of your priorities this year for me is to work with the Chamber and EDC on expanding our broadband, not only in the city but in the county. So we've got a couple of bills that are pending before the legislature that could provide some funding for the city and the county to expand our broadband. So we're tracking those bills. Senate Bill 5 is one of those. And also the state is trying to decide where they want to focus their broadband efforts, whether they want to put it in the comptroller's office or they want to make it part of the University of Texas system. And so a lot of discussions, a lot of bills are going back and forth on broadband. We're tracking those. And the good news is it looks like we might be able to get some funding flowing from the state to local governments to expand and improve our broadband services. Today, there was a hearing before the House Ways and Means Committee on our HOT bill that we introduced, the council supported last year. This is to allow up to 10% of HOT to be used for park improvements. I talked to the city manager of Dripping Springs this afternoon, and the bill was coming up for, she had not testified yet, and the bill was coming up this evening before that committee. We have several other people that are speaking in support of that bill, so I don't have the outcome of that committee meeting. I think they're still meeting this evening. Another bill that we're tracking is House Bill 1869. This would limit city authority to issue debt service, non-voter approved debt service. And as you know, well, one of the concerns about that bill, it includes a short-term debt service that we use every year, such as lease purchase financing. It also includes limited tax notes, which we've issued recently on the animal shelter, basically short-term, 3 to 5 years. The bill, I think, was originally intended to cover certificates of obligation, but it now includes some other debt which the city has used in the past, and so we're concerned that if that bill passes, it would really limit our ability to do lease purchase financing and other financing in the future. So that bill has made it through committee and is going to the calendar committee here in the next week. And then recently, last week, in fact, we got word that a bill had been filed that would limit our ability to regulate signs in our ETJ. And again, the reason we do that, regulate signs in our ETJ here in Fredericksburg, is because a lot of these areas are in our corridors, our entry corridors. And so we want to make sure that we don't have, large billboards and unattractive signs, that may be located a half a mile outside of our city limits. And so there is a bill that would basically prohibit a city from regulating signs in our ETJ, and that's House Bill 1885. And so, again, if any of you are concerned about any of these bills, I would encourage you to contact our legislative delegation and express your views. But that was one new bill that is cause for concern. So that's all the legislative update for this evening.
Okay, thank you. Items for future agenda.
Okay, Mayor and Council, on page 53 and 54 of your agenda packet is preliminary listing of agenda items. We have a couple of items to add to that the May 17th meeting. May 17th, the council will need to, since this will be the first meeting of the new council, you will need to select your mayor pro tem at that meeting. It's a one-year term. And then you see under the public hearing, we have a number of items related to Kevin Spraggins, 3 items, and those are follow-up on the annexation agreement tonight. Those are regarding the Vineyard Hills RV Park across from the airport. So that is coming through Planning and Zoning Commission this week, and it'll be on your next council meeting. The conditional use permit, changes in the future land use plan, and the request for voluntary annexation. Those are all related to the Vineyard Hills RV Park. And then talking to Jason today, we want to give you a report on the citizen input from the Historic District guidelines sessions that we've had over at Pioneer Museum. We wanted to provide a staff report on that at your next meeting on May 17th. Any other items?
When they come to mind.
Okay. On June 7th, if you'll turn over a couple of items we want to add there. If the council at your work session makes any changes to the rules of procedure, then we would need to vote on those at your June 7th meeting. So again, the council work session is on May the 19th. So if you, that was usually at the work session, you don't take any action. So you might have rules of procedure on that meeting. We'll also need to approve the budget amendments at that meeting. And we're asking the council to also consider approval of the historic district guidelines and standards at that meeting. We'll be ready to present that to the council for your consideration. Again, we'll talk about that at the next meeting. If you're not comfortable adding that to the June 7th meeting, we can certainly push that back. But we'll be ready to go for June 7th if the council's ready to consider action on the guidelines and standards. And you can see the other items that will be included on June actually, the revisiting city council meeting location, that needs to be on the next council meeting.
That needs to be on the 17th.
Shelley. Yeah, because you'll need to decide where you want to have your June meeting, any meeting after the end of May.
That needs to be on the May 17th.
Yeah, I just got that, yeah. And then Clinton and Paul Tiber are scheduled to give a report on our water supply and water conservation at the June 7th meeting, so.
Okay, thank you. Council comments, but I'm going to start on this side, Polly. I'm going to give you the last bang for the dollar. All right. Tom?
Another election's behind us. I would like to echo Tom Marshall's views about the number of participants. I've been 15% is a high number, Tom, compared to some of the elections that we've had in the community in the last 15 years. The highest percentage election that I can remember in the last 25 years was at about 30%. There are ways that we've been preaching about how do you get more people involved in city government, and I think the first way you do that is they need to want to be involved. I think that the city of Fredericksburg, I would encourage every citizen to sign up to receive the council agendas, HRB agendas, planning and zoning agendas, the board of adjustment agendas. All it takes, you can have the same thing that the council gets can be in your inbox, and you can look at it. One thing about American democracy is, I think one reason I taught government for many, many years, and most people, when they have an issue, they get involved because that issue affects them. When an issue doesn't affect them, they tend to say, "Oh, okay, everything's fine." Well, it's. I think people need to know what's happening in the city, and they have they have information that's available to them so that they can know what's going on. If you were to talk to somebody on the street and say, "Well, what do you think about the city spending $17 million on the water system?" and they're going to go, "What? When did the city do that?" Well, we did that a couple of years ago, and we have a new system. So, that's I echo that. I wish more people were involved, but I think we've got lots of people that live in this community that have great ideas, and I'd like to finish up my comments by thanking Polly Rickert, who has given us 11 months of dedicated service. I don't think we've seen the last of her, and that's a good thing that we haven't seen the last of her. So thank you very much for what you've done, Polly. I appreciate it.
Bobby?
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone that got out and voted, whether it's by mail, early voting, or in person. And to echo Tom and Tom's comments, we do need more voter turnout, and I think it's very important for this community. The community is growing, and it's expanding in the type of people that are here, the age groups, and I think it's important that people get out and vote. They need to get involved as well, but certainly get out and vote. I personally am thankful for the turnout, and I feel like I'm honored by the support that I've had, and I look forward to serving this community another 2 years. And we live in a very, very special place, and we need to work hard to keep it special. And the only way we're going to do that is through involvement with people and letting your voice be heard. So thank you again, and I'm excited and look forward to the next 2 years. I also would like to thank Polly for her service. Being appointed to a position and not having really too much experience, you drank from a fire hydrant. So I think you've done an outstanding job, and it's really been an honor to serve with you.
Jerry?
Well, I wish we had, when you go to the county over there, you kind of wish they had a PA system like this over there. And I tell you what, you got to sit away from the commissioners and the judge and try and make out what all they're saying there. I'm glad. I look over there and I see Clinton sitting over there, and I'm going, man, I'm glad Clinton's here so he can maybe hear what they're saying. But anyway, I want to ask Clinton to kind of help me out with some of the things that the county had on their agenda the other day. And one of the things that had come up was Dan Kemp came to the county and was asking for funding to help out with the soccer fields on the sports park out there. They've been trying to do the best they can, but every time it rains or they do something, they got more rocks coming up and the kids are getting hurt and things like this. And so they were asking the county to help do some financing. And that was very positive. They didn't say no, but they're going to get it to where they have it on their budget. Another couple of things came up that I'm going to, like I said, ask Clinton to help me out on it. I caught bits and pieces of it. It was with the airport and also with Boot Ranch. If Clinton could help me out with that, what they were.
There were a couple of items that the county commissioners considered on Monday.
A little closer.
The first item was a development off of Business Court by Jacob Grant, and I think Jason may be a little bit more familiar with that particular development, but the commissioners did approve that. And they also, the airport recently went through an RFQ, request for qualification process, to hire a consulting engineer. And in the end, they hired Garver Consulting Engineers to carry out a lot of the design according to their master plan. So, Jason, I don't know if you want to add anything additional to that. I don't know too much about the development.
I guess which one were you asking about?
Jacob Grant and Business Court.
I have not seen anyone. I have not reviewed that since I've been here, so I'll do some research, and Jerry, we can get together and I'll fill you in on that one.
Yeah, I went by to get some of their minutes over there, but they're so busy over there, they didn't have any minutes done up, so I didn't have anything to refer to. And then Boot Ranch was?
Not familiar with that item.
You can't remember that one either, huh?
No, sir.
Okay. Anyway, so that was about with the county. They're pretty laxed on all their agenda items. But I did want to, for the last, I did want to say to Polly, I said, gosh, you've been great. I've told you that quite a few times. You have very sound judgment. Your integrity is great. You always put up positive insight and research, and I always appreciate your insight. You've done a great job.
Ollie, I'm not letting you go. I'm gonna let you go last because I want you to get the last thunder. I'm sorry. I'm gonna jump in. First, I'm gonna just reiterate, Polly, you've been one hell of a council member. You hit the ground running. You brought another dimension to our council with your business expertise and your opinions and your way you could articulate it, which I always really did appreciate. I hope that you'll continue to be somehow involved with the city. I know you're not gone but not forgotten, but you're going to be not forgotten. So again, thank you, and best wishes on the next path you take. All right, it's all yours, Polly, and you can talk all you want.
Okay. Well, first off, I want to thank the people who actually voted for me. I really appreciate it. And, I got dropped into this as an appointee. My initial thing was I wanted to get back to planning and zoning as fast as I could. And then got into it and figured, well, I'd already invested all this time and effort in it, I might as well run. So hopefully I'll get back on planning and zoning at some point when a slot comes up and focus in on some of the other things that I'm passionate about, like how do we attract and retain middle-income working families, which is the demographic that we're losing so fast. So that'll be mostly my focus. Thanks.
Thanks for the memories. Yeah, okay. Thank you. All right. No further comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Aye.
So moved.
Okay, we got a motion by Polly, good. Second? Tom, okay, any further discussion?
No.
Okay, vote.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you all for coming and enjoy. Have a safe evening.